You are listening to Eastman's Flycast, an adventure fly fishing specific podcast covering travel, tactics, and next level insight. Now your host, Brian Barney.
Hey, what's happening, guys? Got a brand new Eastman's Flycast for you. So today I'm going to jump on. I want to talk about this late summer fishing, early fall fishing, give you guys some tips and tactics to hopefully be more successful. So we'll get right into it. Just want to thank my sponsor for today's show, Avid Max. Avid Max has absolutely everything for fly fishing. So if you're in the market for new rods, reels, lines, tippet, flies, fly tying material, they have apparel, great clearance section. Make sure to check out avidmax.com. They also have a in-store location that's right outside of Denver, so you can go in and see them there. And they've got a really knowledgeable staff of all passionate individuals that know fly fishing in and out and can help you get set up for any adventure out west. And whether that's fishing for brown trout in Montana, fishing the coast for steelhead, or also fishing the salt for bones and tarpon and cuda and things of that nature. So if you're in the market, anything fly fishing, make sure to check them out, avidmax.com. And with that, let's get into this podcast. So we're getting into late summer now. Hoppers are really turning on. It's been a good hopper year. And just been a lot of fish in the system that are hungry in there. We've still got hoot owl restrictions here on the Madison, but I've been seeing a lot of fish, like 20 to 24, which has been amazing. So these hoppers, you know, they're real similar to the salmon fly hatches. You're fishing a great big dry fly. And this time of year, I mean, once it gets into late summer, early fall, I've always got a rod with a hopper tied on. And even if I want to fish streamers, like I'll bring two rods with me, one tied up for hoppers, one tied up for streamers. But those hoppers, they just attract big fish. It's a big meal, a lot of protein, a lot of weight for these fish, and so they're hunting and looking for these hoppers. And I do notice that like windy days are really good, where these hoppers take off out of the grass and the wind blows them on the water. I also notice like I like warm days for hoppers as well. They'll just come up and eat it. And hoppers, like when you're fishing salmon flies, it's like this high water where this high water pushes up, and a lot of these fish are on these bank lines. But now we're into this later season in this warmer water. And so, you know, these trout are laying in different places. They're laying in their summer runs. They want to be in oxygenated, fast-moving water, but they aren't sitting on the cuts as much. I mean, if you can find a deep cut bank, great, but the water's getting low this time of year, and so they're sitting more in, like, the heart of the runs. So when I'm fishing these hoppers, you know, it's not something where I'll sit in the same place all day long. Like I love fishing out of a drift boat and being able to work these runs. And a lot of times I'm not working the bank line as much. I'm working the drop off, and the drop off can be 2 or 3 feet out, you know, wherever it starts to disappear into that water and really drop off that edge. And so, you know, I'll fish the seam, but I almost fish out just a little bit more on these things. And then really looking for center holding water. Anything right now that has depth and has flow, those fish are just loving. It seems like they're really moving into those big runs. And when I'm working a hopper out of the boat, you know, you get one chance at your shot at the bank. So I'm really looking for the best run and the best lie. And you know, it tells you a lot, like just being out there fishing too. As you start fishing these hoppers, you start to figure out where these fish are lying and where they want to eat it. And where you get eats is, you know, you try to transpose that to different bank lines. So if you're getting it on the drop-off, you're throwing it on that drop-off. Sometimes they can even be out in the heart of the river a little bit more, you know, where they're really in the flow of that water and sitting out there and looking for a big meal like a hopper. So I'll really work these different lines and figure out where these fish are sitting, you know. And as I start to fish around boulders and rocks, I love to throw it and let it drift down in. And a lot of times there'll be a fish sitting right above that rock. It like gives a little relief to the current, and so sometimes I'll get eats right on the front of the rock. But I like to kind of fish these bugs, and I like to keep them on the water. I don't like to overly cast these things. I think it's like one of the biggest mistakes. These fish really like to see it and see it coming down the run at them and time it up and then eat that thing. And so, a lot of people make the mistake of casting too much. The art of fishing these hoppers is making a good cast, getting a good lie or a good drift or good run that you like, and then being able to mend it and being able to kind of swim it around a little bit. So as I come down into these boulders and these rocks, I'm throwing up above them, I'm getting my mends all set, and then I'm drifting down to the front of the rock, and right as I get to the front of the rock, then I'm going to swim this thing out to the edge of the rock, and I'm going to swim it as close to that rock as I can, right by the edge of it, and then let it drift down below that rock. And, it's amazing, like a lot of times you'll get eats next to the rock, a lot of times you'll get eats below, and then sometimes, like I was saying, you'll get these eats above. And this time of year, salmon flies, I may run 1 or 2 drifts by, and he either eats it or he doesn't. And same thing with hoppers. They're either going to eat it or they're not. But it seems like there's more opportunity for fish to be lying across the total run. And so, if I'm stopped and I'm fishing a spot, I'm going to start close to me, wherever the run starts, or maybe off my rod tip, and I'm going to run a drift there. And I'm going to run these really long drifts. I'm going to throw mends into them and keep fishing them. And you just can't let that line pull that hopper at all. I mean, sometimes they'll eat it like while it's moving, or skittering it across the top of the water. But for the most part, I like to fish a dead drift. So I'll swim it to get it into position, and then I let it go down. I just let it drift down through there and do that true dead drift. I feel like this is trout really like to eat it that way. And then, also like they're able to time it up. Like when it's moving, a lot of times those fish will miss that bug or it pulls out. But as it's dead drifting, it seems like they get to time it up and they eat that bug really well. So when I'm working it, I'll run off the rod tip, then I'll run out a foot, then I'll run out a foot more, all the way across the run. And so I might do multiple drifts, and I will do multiple drifts. And it seems like if I miss a fish out there, I won't go right back to him. Like the move on that deal, like if you miss a good fish or he comes after it, like if you're going down in a boat, you got no choice but to try to throw where he was and see if he'll come on it again. But for the most part, I like to hold my fly and just give it a few minutes. Let things calm down, let that fish get back in its routine, sitting in that line, and then I'll throw back in. And that patience is just a killer on these trout. Like, so if you miss one and it's a good trout, just stand there on the bank and soak it in for a little bit. Kneel down and just wait, and then go back to that fish with a good drift. And more times than not, they'll eat it, especially if you give them a little break like that. So I'm really stopping and working these runs and working it all the way from me, working it across. And I like to work close to me to start with. That way my line isn't spooking any fish as I cast over fish. And so I'll run that tight line and then just keep running them out. And you get really good at making these drifts. Like a lot of it is in the presentation of this deal. Like not letting that line pull that hopper at all, that true dead drift. And when you can get really good at that, you get a lot of eats. And so it's like I'll throw up above me. And a lot of times I won't throw a mend at it right away. I'll throw up above me, and I'm just stripping in as this bug's coming down at me. And then as it just about gets to me, a little bit above me, I'm going to throw a mend at it. And a perfect mend is where you throw a loop of your line above the fly. And when you throw this loop of the line, like a perfect mend, it doesn't move your hopper at all. It picks up all the line, and it stacks it above your bug. And your bug doesn't move. It just keeps floating. Like, that's a perfect mend. So, if you mend too hard or throw that loop too hard, what it'll do is pick up your bug and then re-toss it out. And then your line isn't stacked very good. It's just not the right method. And if you don't throw hard enough, then you continue to have a loop of line that sits below your bug that'll then pull it and not give it that drag-free drift. And this mending is so important. Like on dry flies, it's so important on nymphing. Really, all types of fishing. Like you have to master this mend, as that's the key to catching fish and getting this really good presentation. So, cast up above me, and I'm stripping line as it comes at me. About when it gets to me or a little bit above me, I'm going to throw a mend at it, and then I'm going to fish it down. And the current and the drift really dictate like when you're going to mend again. You'll start to see your line start to stack up below the bug. It starts to pull it, and that's when you want to throw another mend. And then, so I'm mending it, and maybe in a drift, I may mend it 6, 7 times total, maybe 5 times total. So once up above me, then as it comes by me, it usually needs another drift there or another mend there. Down below me a little bit, another 10 feet, another mend. And then as it starts to get 10, 20 feet below me, I'm going to run out of room to pick up all that line and mend. And so what I want to do is I want to stack that line above that bug. And then as I continue to feed it line down below me, and this is like a technique that you use to really fish a lot of water. So it's like really extending your drift and fishing way down below you. And you can fish 100 feet below you, and you can still set the hook on it. You just got to stack that line above it, and as you're feeding it line, you continue to stack this line straight above that bug, and you feed it downstream. And then if that fish eats it, like you really got to pull and set the hook hard, and I go, gosh, it's kind of tough to describe on a podcast, like, right-handed, because you can be fishing any way, but basically backing away from that fish and like to tighten that line and then strip on it. To try to get to that fish if he eats it, like way down below me. And with a nymph sometimes, or even that dry fly, you can do like this extended loop drift, and you actually use the drag of the line to set the hook when he eats it. So it gets way down below you, and you almost have a little loop going downstream. And it's, it's not... It's not the true dead drift, or it is a dead drift, but then when he eats it, you use that tension of the line and keep your rod tip low to kind of pull on him. I've used that hook set as well, but I really like the drag free is the best. If you can stack that line above you and get it, and you have to read the current. Like sometimes, the current's really moving out in front of you and it's going the opposite way close to you, or it's almost still water below you, and you got to keep your line going in that water. You may have to even reverse mend and throw the mend downstream so that water isn't pulling your bug upstream, and so it really is reading the water, and it's just fishing a bunch, like learning how to do these drifts. But it is extremely important to catching fish. It's like learning these drifts and learning these mends, and then also reading the water. Like we talked about the drop-offs and where those fish will sit on the drop-offs. But the Madison's weird. Like the Madison, they call it a 100-mile riffle. And I'm just using this for an example. Like I fish a bunch of western rivers, and all this reading water transposes to different rivers, where fish like to sit and where fish like to live. But the Madison's wild because it's a 100-mile riffle. And when I first started fishing, it was almost daunting to me. I had a hard time reading water and figuring out where the fish were sitting because it all looked the same. But after you go down for a while, you start to be able to recognize these spots. And as we're now like into this later season, these fish are going to sit more in the heart of these runs and these deep runs. They love to sit in middle features, and middle features are tough for people to. It's tougher for people to read that water and diagnose, but anytime you get the right speed and the right depth in the Madison, there's fish sitting in there. So I love to look for like this nervous chop that'll form in the middle in these buckets and different places where the current pushes. Like these fish love to sit in those type of spots. And so I'm constantly looking for digs in the middle. I've got one great inside corner on the Madison too. Like the inside bends where you get current, but they have like little boulders they can sit behind that break the current and grab food. They love these, and especially for hoppers too. So I'm always looking for these inside bends, these features, and those inside bends also fish really good with a streamer. And I've done podcasts on these streamers. I've talked about it a bunch. You guys know that I love to toss streamers, and it just hunts for really big fish, as do hoppers. But it's just a different style of fish, this predatory fish that will eat a streamer. And so, like, I always have a streamer rod, but it's tough because you don't catch a bunch off a streamer. Like, you have to work really hard and fish everything perfectly, and you only get rewarded a handful of times for it, or you may only get rewarded, a couple times in a whole day of throwing it in the right spots. But right now, the streamer eat is pretty good. And they can see this streamer in dirty water, colored up water. I think they almost feel it moving through the water, can sense it like with their lateral lines and eat those streamers. But it's just a really big meal for them, and they're the bigger predatory fish. And so I always like to have a streamer. And, that streamer, like I work it different ways. Like, I'll swing it where I throw it downstream, like at about a 30-degree angle or whatever, and just grab it and let it swim across the run, and then take a couple steps down and throw it again. And it swims really low. Like, I like to use a weighted line here, and then my leader off that is very short, like 2.5, 3 feet, so that weighted line will get it down. And the weighted line really matches your rod. Like, you get the right grain weight of line to match your rod type, but it really swims it good. And then you can get different depths of weighted line. So they have sink rates on them, whether that's a 4.5 or 6.7. I think it's 7 inches per. 7 inches per second? That doesn't sound right. But it's a sink rate on there. And so you can get different sink rates for different water, and it just takes toying around with it. Like, I really like that. The airflow line's been really good to me. I really like the Scientific Angler has a great streamer line. So you just find a streamer line you like, and some of them will have replaceable tips. I kind of just like to get a universal line that I can just fish everywhere off my single hand rod. But my double hand rod, I will switch out tips and find the right tip for the right run. And so I've got some different sink rates on it. And that spay rod is all swinging across. But I also find that a single hand rod, it fishes really good, like right now in the summer months, off this strip pole, this little pop you give it. So I'm pretty much casting straight out, and I'm using a little bit of the drag of the water, so I'm casting straight across from me, 90 degrees out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my rod tip downstream and low, and I'm going to give it a strip, and then I'm going to pop the tip of my rod. Strip, pop, strip, pop, strip, pop. And I'm feeling, too, if you feel anything on there, it's usually a fish that's eating on a strip pop, but, sometimes you'll bump bottom and kind of feel that. You just start to get a feel for this line. And then when he eats it, you strip hard and set. But I love this strip pop, and I use that going out of a boat a bunch, and then also I'll stop and work runs, and so I'll run that strip pop 90 degrees out from me, and then I'll take a couple steps downstream. And if you're really in a deep run, you can cast upstream and give it that strip pop, and it'll get deeper. And then if it's a shallower run, you can cast a little bit downstream using more of the pull of that current and use that strip pop. And so it really comes from a feel of fishing these things a bunch. And you're trying to get it on the bottom and get it swimming, but you also don't want to get hooked up on the bottom or snagged. And so, it's like this, your instincts dictate you like how to fish the run, and you'll try out different techniques and tactics on it and go, oh, that one went too deep or that one went too shallow, and then you kind of adjust from there to find the right strip rate. You can try fast strip rates, slower strip rates, smaller strips, longer strips. So there's like so much to it. And then you run through a run, fish through a run with a color, and then swap your colors. And darker water, colored water, I love fishing a black. And I love fishing black anyways. It just fishes really good. And then out here out west, we do really good with olive is another one of our favorite colors. Yellow has been a dynamite color for me this year. I have caught some of my biggest fish on yellow. I haven't fished yellow that much, and I don't, sometimes I catch a lot of fish off yellow, but I would say the majority of the time I don't catch a lot, but I catch some really big ones. And like Dylan likes to say, they like to eat their own. So brown trout like to eat brown trout. So that's why they like that yellow color on there, But I don't know what it is, but yellow is fished really good for me. I had a day this year where tan fished really good for me. So I'll kind of run through the colors. I also like white, like a green and white. That killed it for me this year in a couple different systems. So I like to run through these different colors. And I love, like a really good pattern, like a double articulating, and pinch my barbs on it. Just, like a lot of guys like to fish barbs. And I do like to catch those big ones I hook into. I just find it's just less stress on those fish. And the hooks pull out easier when I land a fish. And so... and I feel like if you keep constant tension, that you're gonna catch them, even without barbs. And so a lot of times I'm pinching both my barbs, but I love those double articulating bugs. That I love Kelly Gallup's ties. I got to get him on the podcast here. I hit him up a while ago. I just got to run down to his shop and get him on here. So I'll get him on in the near future. I got some good guests coming up, but I love his ties. Partly because he fishes here in Montana on a lot of the systems I fish, but I take his ties all over, and they always fish good. So that he's got like 14-year-old boy names for these things, but he fishes like this sex dungeon, and which the story, I got the whole story from my buddy that guides for Kelly Gallup, and it was about this client, this gal that they fish with, and she was fishing one of these patterns before he had named it, and she goes, "Gosh, that looks like something to be in my sex dungeon or something." That's a story I heard, anyways. I'm just repeating a story that I heard, so who knows if I have the details right. But I do think his names for his flies are so funny. But it's called the Sex Dungeon, and fish is really good in different sizes. So he's got a big one that's like a size 2 or size 4, I believe. And that one fishes really good. And I do like fishing the bigger patterns. It just seems to attract bigger fish. But sometimes that small pattern just kills them. It's killed them for me in smaller systems. It's also killed it for me in bigger systems. Like I just tend to get more action off it and catch some really good fish. So the smaller size is like a size 6. And it's just got really good action and movement in the water. And he ties it in a multitude of colors. And so I love those patterns. And they cost good money to get a good collection of streamers. Like it isn't easy, but I just kind of collect them as I go. And so I love fishing that sex dungeon. He's also got a silk kitty that fishes really good. He's got a bunch of great patterns. The TNA, so like I say, like 14-year-old boy names, but the TNA is a great green and white. I love fishing the sparkle minnow. And I just have this array and this selection of flies, and ones that I believe in now, that I've fished, that I've built confidence in. And it's wild. You have to do the same thing right all day long, fishing the good runs, fishing where fish are, and believing in it, and then all of a sudden magic happens. And, I've caught my best fish of the year off that streamer this year. Like it's a really good producer for me, and it hunts for those big brown trout, big rainbows. So I love fishing that thing. And I just try different patterns, and I'll run different colors through water. And once I start to get action on a color, that's what I stick with. And they fish so good in these rivers, like going down out of a drift boat too. Man, you get a good shot, and you get a good shot at the bank. And same thing here, where you're adjusting whether you're throwing back up and behind the boat to kind of get it down deep, or if you're throwing straight across or even down below you. And I use that strip pop in that boat too. And you think of your fly like down underneath the water, and a lot of times you can see it, which is great. But just trying to swim it by rocks and by boulders and by fishy stuff and in fishy water. And as you swim it, like going down out of a boat, you see a lot of fish chasing it. And one of my best moves this year out of the boat is, so I'd throw and I'd cast out. And I'd strip pop, strip pop, strip pop. And I'm looking down in the water for my bug to start to get close to the boat. And right as the bug gets close, so say I'm pulling straight away from me, or like straight towards me at a 90-degree angle. And as soon as I can see this bug come up, I almost take my rod and move my tip to upstream, and what it does is it kicks this bug and moves it from swimming straight at me 90 degrees to kicks it to swimming upstream and kind of up and at me. And it's amazing the times where I just see that bug and I kick it upstream like that, where those fish will hammer right there at the boat. It's like so exciting to see and witness too, And so I do that move every time I strip back to the boat. And then because it's amazing how many times you catch your fly and there'll be fish after it and you pull it right out of the water and they don't get to eat it. And you see a lot of action on your bug, which is fun and exciting this time of year. You see fish chasing it, and they'll chase it all the way to the boat, or they'll be grabbing at it. Or sometimes you'll even see a couple fish chasing it. And you see some really big fish after this thing, which keeps the stoke level high. And it also tells you that your bug's working. You know that color is fishing good. So get it to the boat from that 90-degree angle, put my rod tip upstream, and then I just kind of swim it up by me. And a lot of times that'll get a strike for me as well. Just that switch of direction and that kind of going upstream. And then I recast. And you just only get one cast at the bank, so you try to make like your best swim through the run. If that makes sense. Like you can only cover, you're going to cover 20 feet of water as your boat's sliding down. And so when you throw it out, you really want to cover the best section of that hole where you think those fish are living. And two, when you throw upstream, you're able to cover like a lot more of that run. You're able to keep your bug on the seam more or on the edge more where you think those fish are living. And so like those are good tactics to use. And then I just mix it up and see what's working on those things. And then those big runs, I'm stopping and I'm working and I'm swinging it through, I'm strip popping it through. I'm really feeling the bottom and trying to feel those fish and trying to get into them. And the streamer is like this deadly tactic for this late summer, and then coming into early fall, like these big fish are going to start to eat. And actually, I mean, they have been eating. I've been hearing a bunch of big fish that are eating streamers and then also eating those hoppers as well. So, I mean, they're eating right now, but it seems like that fall season is a really good season to target big fish, same as the spring. So it's like getting out on these systems and fishing it, and even with this hoot owl restriction, like the river's been fishing really good, and it gets a good break every afternoon. So I think it's a good time of year to get out and get after these things, and and even some smaller systems. Like I've fished that. I got some smaller rivers around me, and fishing hoppers right now is a blast on those things. But I'll bring my hoppers and bring my streamer rod, and it seems like I'll go half and half to these fish, like half of them on a hopper, half of them on a streamer. So it's just so fun. High mountain lakes are fishing really good right now. Those are always fun to get into. Try to catch a dry fly hatch out there, or fish these smaller leech patterns and things of that nature where you're stripping it back in, the same as fishing a streamer. And these high mountain lakes, these trout in them are really hungry right now. So that's a fun endeavor as well. And the crowds are gonna start dying off here as the summer crowds start to head back home, and kids get back in school, and people aren't on vacation as much. And so it's gonna die down and get way better on these rivers too. So yeah, I want to fish these things hard and have a good season, and definitely want to travel around some more. I've been super busy here with work and minimal time to get out, but starting to plan adventures for next season and start to get ready for fishing for these things. And this fall season should be good too. I've got a trip planned for this fall that I'm really excited about, where you go fish for 30 inches, and this is more like a technical nymphing spot, but you can catch like the biggest fish of your life. And you see them porpoise in front of you, those fish are in there, and you catch them every now and again. Not only is there good ones in there, like there's 30 inches in there. So I really want to hit that hard this fall and see if I can get a personal best. I just love those great big brown trout, and like I say, that fall is such a good time of year to get them. And then I love it as it gets into those winter months and spring months as well. That's when I get the majority of my fishing in. But yeah, just trying to get all my stuff geared up make sure I get out a little bit here in this late summer and throw some hoppers, because I got to throw those year in, year out. And it's big fish eat hoppers, and it's just really fun to see them come up on that big bug. And these dry fly hatches, I love them, and I've caught some really big fish off small dry fly hatches, but I love targeting these big dry fly hatches. And so right now, like, it's hoppers, and going down out of a boat for me, like, that's what I want to throw and what I want to drift, because I know it hunts for big fish and also gets action, and these fish love to eat it. So super stoked. Time to get out and get after these things. I hope you guys are getting out and getting on the water and enjoying yourself. Summers can be so busy, but it's such a great time of year to be out and wet wading these rivers and hunting for these trout and watching a dry fly float down a run. So with that, guys, let's wrap this thing up. And it's Eastman's Flycast. Really enjoyed doing this, so thanks you guys for all the support, and we'll keep putting these things out. I've got some really good guests coming up and some good shows coming up, so I'm excited for it. So with that, check in with you guys in a couple weeks.